Hello, fellow music nerds. Welcome back to Music Makers and Soul Shakers. I'm your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a guitarist, songwriter, and producer originally from Vancouver, Canada. I love all aspects of making records, so I thought I'd make a podcast and bring in a slew of folks who've also made records in one way or another and yak about it with them. Each month I'll be bringing you an in-depth conversation with a new guest. It may be a musician, a songwriter, a producer, or an engineer, but each of these people will have a fascinating story to tell about their lives and their involvement in the process of being a music maker and or a soul shaker. Thanks for joining me, and feel free to reach out to me through the podcast website at www.stevedawson.ca. And now, here's another episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. All right, then, let's get down to business. The business today being Jim Campilongo. He really is one of the great, unique players on the planet. There's a tradition of incredible tele players that kind of slip under the radar of a lot of folks, but come to be known, especially to musicians the world over, as being the best at what they do. Roy Buchanan and Danny Gatton come to mind, and add Jim Campilongo to that list. I'm too young to have seen Roy Buchanan, but I did get to see Danny Gatton, and when I was living in Boston, I was about 18, and Danny Gatton was playing at a club there called The Channel, and I used to go to these clubs because I was underage and hang out at the back door like at around noon, and the bands would usually show up a little after that, and I would help carry their crud into the bar, and they would undoubtedly give me a backstage pass, and I would hang out backstage to see the show. I got to see a ton of shows that way, and it was great for me, actually. I got to see all kinds of cool stuff and had some great experiences and interactions with bands. Danny Gatton was one of those, and he was just the nicest guy. And Jim Campilongo seems to follow in that tradition as well. We've never met, but he took a big chunk of time out of his day to speak with me. And I'm not going to be doing big elaborate intros this season like I have done before, due to having callers in like we're doing. But I will tell you that Jim has been a mainstay around New York for the last 20 years, most of which time he's had a weekly gig that, you know, if you were a guitar player in that city or anywhere near, you just had to be there to see him. He is an imaginative player, fiery. He's improvising finely crafted solos that are tight and loose at the same time. He's known for monstrous guitar tone, and he's a great writer of thoughtful, quirky, and beautiful instrumental music. He also had a band for a while with Norah Jones called the Little Willies, and they made a couple records, but for the most part, he's played around New York with his trio or other bands, and he has a recent project with Luca Benedetti called Honeyfingers, and they've made a couple records that are super cool too. And also Jim has a huge catalog of lessons for sale and further background information, and all of his music can be found at jimcampilongo.com. I am encouraging you to go there and get his albums and dig deep. All right, let's get on with the show. Enjoy my conversation with Jim Campilongo.
Where are you anyway? Are you in Nashville?
Yeah, that's right.
You guys had a tornado that was terrible right before this.
Man, it's so crazy. Like I actually we got a little stir crazy yesterday and went for a drive over to East Nashville. And the devastation there is like, I've seen pictures of it obviously, but I live about 10 miles south of there and the tornado didn't touch where I am. But man, just seeing some of the buildings and like just seeing the focused energy of the tornado, like one building will be completely destroyed and then right next to it, it didn't get touched. It's crazy. And, there's all these people that are screwed, man. Like their houses are destroyed and businesses are gone. And now we've got this. It's so bad for a lot of people that are in that area.
Yeah, that's just, my mother has a saying, if you have to look at the bright side. You know things are going really badly. But thinking of like losing your home and the implications of that, and possibly your family, and then this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it's bananas.
that makes me feel like, I got nothing to complain about.
And I mean, the tornado happened and there was a lot of rallying around the city, which was good. And there was, like fundraisers and all this stuff happened right away, which was awesome. And it was good to see that like community gathered around the people that really needed it. But then this thing hits and everyone has to just go inside and like forget about all that. I mean, they're not forgotten about, but there's nothing you can do right now.
Nothing. Yeah, it's really tough.
Can you just give me a little rundown of, like how, like as a musician, how this whole thing is affecting you? I don't want to obviously spend the whole time talking about this, but I do want to get a bit of a taste for it. Like obviously everything's been canceled. Like you're at ground zero there. It's crazy how bad it's getting in the New York area. What's like on the ground? Is it like, are people kind of feeling panicky or are you just kind of holding up and waiting for this all to pass?
Well, more the latter than anything. I mean, I'm I'm over 60 and I have a long history of respiratory problems.
Oh, really?
So I'm kind of and it's funny when I talk to my friends, I find out I'm not alone, or a guy I've known my whole life. I found out he had asthma. So. Some of us are more vulnerable in theory. So I've been, for a while, about 3 weeks, I've been quarantining. Right before I quarantined, I flew to Boston, did a clinic at Berkeley, and played 2 shows. One I sat in with Duke Levine. It was amazing. He's amazing. And then I played a show in packed, small clubs.
Yeah.
And the whole time, I mean, I just felt like when I was at the hotel and pushing lobby with my first finger exposed, I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm going to find the date because it's like a million years ago. Yeah, March 3rd, 4th, and 5th we're talking. So
right. So early.
It was early, but, I was kind of starting to really pay attention to the science of it. And I'm not usually, I'm late for everything, as far as like cutting edge ideas. But even beyond that, in early February, I was talking to a friend and saying, I wonder if we should fly out of here.
Yeah.
Because I had heard about what was going on in China, and it just made sense to me that it was going to happen in New York. On some level. And this isn't a great place to be. So I've been quarantining. Now, as far as like people, and how they're reacting, I don't see anybody panicking. Everyone's shell-shocked, I would say, for the most part. But since New York's such a big city full of total compromise constantly, whether you're on the subway or you go to the post office or you even go to Trader Joe's, it's pre-coronavirus, the line may start where the door opens.
Yeah.
For example. So people are really maintaining, the social distancing guidelines. Everyone's wearing a mask. People fall into line here pretty well. There's no real shortages that I know of. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get my favorite cleaner that has a little bleach in it, and that was out. And there was, there's certain items you're like, like yesterday there was no iceberg lettuce, for example.
Yeah, lettuce is a hot commodity all of a sudden.
Yeah, and so, but generally it's good here, but it is getting closer and closer. Like I'm knowing more people who've had it, or I have acquaintances that someone died, they know, and all in New York. So, and they say the next 2 weeks are really going to be rough. So hopefully not.
Yeah, I was out. I was out on tour. I was doing a run with the Wood Brothers out on the west coast of the states, and we left around that date, like the 4th. And it was we were sort of like kind of casually aware and almost joking about the whole thing. And then as the tour progressed, it just like got more and more uncomfortable, and the crowds were pretty big, and I was getting nervous. And then at the end of it, it was around the 12th, and the rest of the tour got canceled at that point. We were supposed to play in Kirkland, Washington, which is that town where all those people died right at the beginning, and man, it was feeling weird.
Yeah, basically, you put on the brakes about 8 or 9 days, 10 days after I started quarantining.
You're a very wise man.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I mean, I did. That said, I don't want to undermine you being impressed with me at all, but I had read that masks were pointless and all this stuff, and I had been in the queue for this super duper mask, and I canceled it. And now, my buddy who brought my groceries home gave me one of his masks, and it's not a super duper, but it's just a paper one, because I had been wearing like basically an ascot around my face.
Yeah.
And it was real pain, man. My glasses were fogging up if I needed them, and was slipping off. So, I wish I was a little more Johnny on the spot with the mask situation, even though a lot of the advice was it doesn't matter, but it does matter, and it might. If we're carriers,
Yeah.
it's going to help protect someone else. It may not keep, the microbes may get in paper, but that said, it's a real good public service. And as I said a couple minutes ago, everyone around here is wearing a mask. I rarely see someone without one. I mean, I really hate being here because, I live in a 4-unit building. So if I just leave my apartment, you get into the microbe zone.
Yeah, I bet.
So if I go check my mail, I touch 2 doors, get the mail, which might be infected, come back, leave my shoes in the hall, wash my hands, even just to leave literally my front door.
Yeah.
And I know I have friends back in California, and they have backyards, or some people are upstate. And I do have to say, envy isn't maybe the right word, but it sure sounds good. And I'm getting real pale, my friend. In the mornings, what I do is I leave at 5:30 a.m. and I walk across the Williamsburg Bridge into Manhattan and back. And, there's hardly anyone. Sometimes it's a little weird because the people out are still up from the night before.
Right.
And, there is the feeling of being the last man on earth, because it's shut down and all the storefronts are closed. But that said, it's about an hour and a half walk, and it's helping kind of, beat Satan out of me a little bit.
Yeah. I'm doing the same thing actually. I'm taking a walk every day almost, and that's something I didn't normally do, and I actually find it to be very helpful. So maybe I'll continue doing that after all this shit is subsided.
I'm trying to build new routines, because without routines, I'm really a fish out of water. Like, I like routine. Mm-hmm. Not complete boredom or anything, but just, I'm a human. I think I need to be productive somewhere in my DNA, So yeah. It's part of a routine I'm trying to build upon. I feel insatiable when it comes to talking about this. And I know many of my friends call me up, and which is part of like what's good in my life right now. Like, yeah. Friends are reaching out and we're talking on the phone, just like me and you are doing right now. And but I hope your listeners aren't tired of it, and it just feels good or informative, or they could relate to it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get people to talk about it, and actually encouraging listeners to call in and tell me about their perspective on it too, just because the musician community doesn't get a lot of attention, unless some famous person gets the virus. We don't really get talked about. So I was hoping to, hear from some people and from you, like about, what was going on and how it was affecting your routine. So there you go.
Well, yeah, there's the professional side of things. I mean, we've talked about the personal side of things, and none of it matters if my mother gets sick or if I get sick or the people I love or my friends or anyone, people in Nashville. None of it really matters. Like, money is a number, and health is something very real that we need. But that said, professionally, so far, so good. I have many. When I did this clinic in Berkeley, I made sure that I told the young people there that look young to me. They're like 19, 20.
It's young.
It's young. I didn't think so when I was 19 or 20, though. Did you?
No, absolutely not.
Not at all. I thought I knew everything. That said, I tried to make a point out of being a musician now as doing a lot of things. And I made a little list of what I did. And a lot of them were, most things on the list weren't musical. And I don't think I said this, but one has to wonder if Thelonious Monk could have survived in today's musical climate. Mm-hmm. And I love Thelonious Monk, but you, just as an example, like a guy who's like all about, playing.
Right.
So, I have downloadable lessons. I have a Patreon. I've been writing, I write a column for Guitar Player magazine, blah, blah, blah. I could keep going on, and I'm not saying this to impress anybody, but a lot of it doesn't matter. I could be in Timbuktu with an internet connection and a guitar, I guess I would need, and I could at least, squeak by.
Right.
I'm not a musician who... just to put it succinctly, is like waiting for the phone to ring for a gig. Yeah. So I'm okay there. And in some ways, things have spiked. A lot of Skype lessons, even though it's on Zoom lessons. I mean, I'm okay. And in the back of my mind, the last 2 years I've been really concentrating on that aspect of my career, that's independent of geography.
One thing I have noticed is that for so long in your career, and I want to go back and talk about other things, but now that you bring this up, like you were like a weekly New York guy. Like I know you moved from California but you've had these stints at particularly two places, I guess, the Rockwood and the what was the place before that? The Living Room, right?
Rockwood and the Living Room. That's right. And I played once a week in New York for 18 years.
It's amazing. So let's talk about that for a second. So first of all, like, was that a conscious decision for you as like a musical decision as a way to function and to work and to survive? Or was it just like something that you fell into, like a pattern that just sort of worked for you? I'm just wondering, like, that weekly thing, it really seems to have suited you in a lot of ways. And I'm just wondering if it was conscious or if it just happened.
No, it was conscious. I mean, it's, I pursue things I can control. I pursue, for example, I've pursued at least twice in my life to get some kind of tour going on in Japan. I love playing there. I've played there twice. I have like somewhat of a fan base there. But at some point, despite people with their hearts in the right place and me being in magazines there and all that, it just didn't materialize. Mm-hmm. So what could materialize is me playing once a week in a residency. And so I pursued that, and it ended up being a really long time. I mean, it started as the Knitting Factory in 2002, technically for 1 month. and we did really well, so we continued it. And I really like that it motivated me to write. It motivated me to be ready, to perform. It also would make the band really good without rehearsing,
Right.
and playing organically. Before that, even, I became more about, back in the day, and we're going back, I had a 4-track machine, and I'd, program the drums and play bass, and I'd give that to the band. And, I left that a long time ago. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be able to play with people who make either decisions I agree with or decisions I would have never thought of. And playing once a week, if not more, because we had other gigs other than our residency, that can really develop. And that was another reason why I really liked playing once a week in New York City.
Yeah, I get that. So if you don't rehearse with the guys and you're constantly writing and I'm assuming arranging tunes, because you also do other people's songs, but how would you say with an original tune, how would you bring it to the band? Do you just sort of throw it to them at a sound check, or do you just like dive in and say, hey, here's a new one in E minor?
No, I mean, it's almost that. Unless it was the group Honeyfingers.
Okay, yeah, which requires more arrangement.
Yeah, that was totally different. And believe me, I loved every minute of it. I love rehearsing and working on ideas and going, hey, I have a harmony idea. Hey, let's try it,
Yeah.
And with people who you tend to agree with, like who hear things, like everyone goes, no, or that's it, and you move on, and rehearsals are really quick that way and productive. But to answer your question, with my trio, what I do is I usually record it on my iPhone, like I'll do a rhythm track on the Boomerang or something, very lo-fi, and maybe play the melody above it, and I write a chord chart. Basically, I mean, it says G, C, D or whatever, D7. Scan that, send an MP3 and go, hey, I'd like to try this on Monday. And quite honestly, I'd say like 60% of the time, the first time, it's like, taking a lamb to the slaughter, because usually, and I'll play something the worst I'll ever play it the first time I play it in public.
Uh-huh.
No matter how much I practice. I don't know why. And sometimes it's the group or they'll do a feel that I didn't anticipate.
Right. That must happen.
Because I'll do something maybe corny and traditional, corny for lack of a better word, or an oompa, like a Chet Atkins rhythm. And then they'll do something that I didn't expect. And generally, it's better. So the first time, if not the first couple times, it doesn't reach its potential. But at the gig, I mean, I usually plan it, and we'll do something that I know, we can play well. You could kick us out of bed at 4 a.m. and we could, instantly play the song well, and it might be a crowd pleaser, like a tune like Monkey in a Movie, for example, or something like that. And then I'll call new song that was sent via email. And I usually will tell the audience that it's the first or second time we're playing it. And
you give a little disclaimer.
Yeah. Total disclaimers. But it kind of gets them on our side, and I think they enjoy the process as we do.
Yeah.
And they're a part of the process. Their energy and their reaction, or what the room feels like, is a big tell. And sometimes it's the opposite of what I expected. For example, I wrote a tune called Coal, C-O-A-L. And, I thought, this is one of those tunes, excuse me, this is one of those tunes that is going to go into some, audio file of songs I don't really play live. And my bassist Chris, God bless him, heard it and he loved it, and he really, I'm really lucky to have a band that cares. And they were, and Chris would be like, "Hey, let's play Cole," and we played it, and I thought, oh boy, this is really going to test the audience. And I always have an eye on the audience, maybe to a fault, but I do. And we played it, and it got a big hand.
Okay.
And I'm usually pretty on. Like, I mean, I don't live in an alternate reality for what the audience likes. Like, we push the envelope quite a bit, but I'm, think, oh, we could get away with this. But I was really dead wrong on that. We ended up releasing it, and it's on the new Sunday's record, Best of Jim Campilongo, and it's one of the unreleased tracks. There's that advantage too. If I didn't play once a week or often, I don't know if that song would have ever seen the light of day or had a chance to develop.
Interesting. So in that period of time, 18 years, like, I know obviously it wasn't 18 years solid, like it was just a general thing that you did, but your reputation skyrocketed during that time. Were you turning work down, like touring, road work, and that kind of thing? Did that come up a lot, and you just said no to it so you could stay and develop this way?
Not really. I'm very proud to be like in a spot in New York. Guitar aficionados would make sure they were there on a Monday. Mm-hmm. That was a real honor because, I mean, I would say that about Red Volkert. Right. If I went to Austin, I'd want to be there when Red Volkert played, and to think that, I was in that stature really meant a lot. Or Les Paul, was on Mondays. And I was kind of that. Or Mike Stern plays at the 55 Bar on Tuesdays. And so that was really nice. But honestly, like, I think, I can't tell because I'm inside my career. But to me, the biggest things that happened to me in my career were probably the 10 Gallon Cat's first couple records. But then the Little Willies. And ironically, the Fender Princeton video I did this video back when I was coloring my hair. And, I mean, to this day, people come to a gig and they'll tell me, yeah, I saw that Fender Princeton video and it turned me on to you. Because a lot of times I'll ask people how they heard of me.
Yeah.
Too, because I'm curious. And for sure, those are the things that might get people to my weekly residency. I mean, certainly somebody might wander in or be there for the band before us because there's multiple bands in New York. We were usually the last one. And they discover us without any intention of doing so. Or ulterior motive, like, oh, I'm going to see this guitar trio after my buddy's band. So, I'm not sure. It sure it makes me known in New York, which is great. As far as turning down tours, I mean, if Nick Cage asked me to play guitar or somebody like that, I mean, I would do it. Or if I can't think of anybody, but somebody like that. So, and just take some time off the weekly gig. I did take some time off. This is going back maybe 2009. I toured with Martha Wainwright for a year, and a couple of times the Willies have done little short tours, but it was never a problem, and I wouldn't have prioritized the residency unless it was booked, of course. But we would only book a month or two in advance, and usually tours don't come up. Like, hey, can you tour the world next week? Right. I've never gotten that call. I don't know. Maybe somebody has. So
that's how Bob Dylan does it, apparently.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
One thing that I've noticed about you as a musician, and one thing I really dig about your recorded output over the years, is that you can hear your playing change and your approach change and your ideas progress. Do you feel like you've kept learning as a musician? And I guess that sort of ties back into this weekly thing, is like, You haven't been static. You've continued to change and progress. I hear a real difference, like both in your touch and your tone and approach from, say, 10 years ago than I do in your most recent stuff. What does progressing musically look like for you now? Like, do you practice a lot? Are you striving? Are you learning stuff? Or do you just, like, is your weekly thing your focus?
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. That's really flattering, and thanks for listening. No, I work pretty hard, as everyone I know does. I practice every day. And I'm very goal oriented. Right now, I've been, because I feel a little preoccupied to be truly creative in this era we're in. I've been running through these hellish exercises and for about 3 weeks. And I generally don't do that kind of thing, but I chose it because it's just making my ears bleed. It's so difficult for me, these exercises. And it's the best thing I could do currently. Because I said there's a certain preoccupation I'm feeling, I think, which is understandable. And a bit, sometimes one is a little emotionally fatigued during this time and everything's changing. But I practice and try to learn. And it's funny, a few months ago, I had a solo guitar gig. And I was really nervous about it. So I sometimes claim I'm the worst solo guitarist in the world, but it's my secret ambition to be a good solo guitarist. And by the way, I am a really good solo guitarist, but only in the privacy of my own home when no one is listening. But that said, I worked through a bunch of tunes on this solo gig. And I came to realize that I don't play, like, in the truest sense of the word. And I had to kind of go, oh, I should expand on this and play this and try this and maybe stumble, but keep going. Just keep going. Don't go, oh, okay, what is the chord baseline, baseline with chords for this? Let me work this out. And it was really freeing, and it took me a while to segue into that. So one could say, like, I don't want to say to a fault, but I'm very goal-oriented. Okay, I'm going to learn this piece, this Chet Atkins thing, note for note. I'm going to play Misty for 10 minutes.
Right.
Yes, and I do practice, and it's funny, I've been saying this lately for the last couple of years. It's always one of my first questions to either my peers or to people who I respect. What do you practice? What are you practicing now? How do you practice? I always wish that guitar magazines would ask that. I mean, I wonder totally, like, what does Jeff Beck do, or what does Steve Vai do, or what does my friend Steve Cardenas do? And it's always a fascinating answer. I mean, even like, do you practice at 10 a.m. or do you practice at 11 p.m. when your wife goes to bed?
Yeah.
And everybody has structure. I mean, I wouldn't ask Steven Seagal, but people who have some depth in their playing, or even if not, I think it's really a good question. And to kind of expand, I mean, I try to play at 10 a.m. if I can, if I'm not working or Skype lessons. That's the time I start practicing, and I try to do 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't count like, playing guitar while I'm watching TV, which I get a lot done doing that, actually. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I try and sit down and do calculus for at least an hour a day, every day.
Yep.
So
sort of late morning is your time to get that done.
I'm a total morning person, Steve. I mean, and as the day goes on, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, or the day kind of can beat me up sometimes. I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but I asked Duke Levine, because I think he's an amazing guitarist, and he practices at night, like late.
Uh-huh.
And I get that. I used to do it when I first started, but now, I mean, sometimes this morning I was practicing at 6 a.m.
Wow.
And it felt really nice. Well, I get up early,
You mentioned that you're doing like a lot of grueling exercises right now because you're not feeling super creative. And I actually can relate to that too, because I also feel kind of anxious right these days, and I don't feel super creative. And I'm doing like funny guitar-y, like some scales and finger stuff and picking stuff that I've never practiced because I just haven't had time or whatever. It's driving my wife bananas. But tell me about some of these. Like, are these exercises you've developed for yourself, or are you like picking them out of some book somewhere, or what are you doing?
Well, I probably built them up too much. It's the G scale. No. It's partially inspired by me asking Luca what he was practicing. And this was a couple weeks ago because I was having trouble being creative. And I wondered what he was doing, and it made me feel better. And I know he just wasn't saying it. He felt the same thing. And it was based on this instructional video that Adam Rogers, a New York guitarist, put out. And he does arpeggios of melodic minor, major, of course, harmonic minor, harmonic major, and Dorian. And he does them, he ascends, and when you get to the highest note of the 7 chord, you go down a half step and descend a half step lower.
Okay.
Go down, go up, and when you reach that high point, you go down. So I did that, and it really stopped my fingers from being autopilot. And while I did it, I was trying to think what chord I was arpeggiating. After I did it a while, I thought all the arpeggio exercises started from the 5th string. And so I decided that I should do the 6th string, where they start on the 6th string. You know what I mean, right?
Yep.
And so I wrote them out, and I came up with like 2 or 3 different versions of harmonic minor, melodic minor, and harmonic major, because they're just uncomfortable no matter what. And at one point I thought I was finished, and I sent them to Luca, and I was kind of like apologizing. I said, hey, look, if you get a second to look at this, that's great. If not, don't worry about it, And he did, and he said, yeah, that's really good. But I forgot how he put it, and I don't want to undersell him, but he said, I'm not very good at the way you wrote them out. And I looked at it, and I thought, I'm not either. Because if I go down in pitch, I prefer going down towards the headstock.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know exactly what I mean. And I had a lot, sometimes it's inevitable. Sure, you got to like stretch a major third to go down in pitch.
Yeah.
And I realized, I could do these, they look good in paper, but I'm really not going to apply this. I know me, and I just don't like doing it. And it's one of the things, Alan Holdsworth would have had no problem. Right?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so I ended up rewriting them. And even like this, I hope it's not boring. It's taken me like 6 minutes to tell you what, I'm practicing. I mean, it took me hours to come up with these fingerings, but I kind of like doing that. Like, I'm really into fingerings.
Sure.
And so now what I'm doing is all those, Dorian, harmonic major, harmonic minor, major, melodic minor, in arpeggios, root 6, root 5. I run the scale, and then I do them in the scale in thirds.
Have you put that up for sale on your website?
No. I kind of, in part, I might put it on Patreon, but I have a lesson called Formatting Your Practice Schedule, and Formatting Your Practice or something. I forgot what it's called. And it's been a really popular lesson. And I'm thinking of either adding this to it or just divvying this out on Patreon, because, and at this point, I'm not so sure like this is valid, but I'm really sensitive about selling something that Adam Rogers inspired from instructional video. Now, it isn't...
Give him a buck.
It is. I'll give him a buck. It's. I'll send him one of my CDs. It isn't plagiarism by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm really sensitive about this, as I should be, and we all should be. So I'm not sure, because I definitely. I mean, even though Adam rips through these things on his little video, who I'm sure your listeners will, there's like a little teaser on YouTube you could see. I kind of think I brought it a step further because I did root 6 and I have the fingerings. I don't know if I just saw the teaser. I don't know if he has the fingerings written down. Maybe he does. I'd be curious what they were. I mean, that's really something. Another thing that fascinates me is how other guitarists finger things.
Sure. It is fascinating.
It's fascinating stuff. And even though we really have to get into it at some point, or we will, and I don't want to alienate anyone, but, a lot of times people ask the wrong question, I think. And certainly at the end of a gig, when somebody asks me, what year is my guitar? Or, wow, your amp sounds great. It's like, the nicest thing they could say. But sometimes I do feel like if I meet someone, like the things I'm interested in are the things we're discussing.
Right. Yeah.
How do you see a minor 7 flat 5 chord? The half diminished chord. There's a couple ways to look at it. Do you see it as a inverted minor chord? Or do you just see it as what it is, or not? Or do you play a major scale a half step above, which doesn't always work? But, for example, like if I meet somebody who could answer those questions and thinks about those things, like Steve Cardenas, like Luca Benedetti, Adam Rogers probably wrote a book on it. Those are the questions I find really interesting.
That's not a typical post-gig question.
It isn't. I mean, I kind of...
You wish it was.
Well, it's a post-gig. I shouldn't have given that as an example. I'll take anything I could get other than you suck, but that said, so a lot of things. What if I get a take two on this? Like, things are gear oriented.
Right, of course.
Okay, yeah. Like that's, instead of talking for 5 minutes and not saying what I meant, things are so gear oriented due to the magazines and all that stuff. And it's interesting stuff, don't get me wrong. We all love it, but sometimes I wish the questions were a little less gear oriented.
That reminds me of, there's that Chet Atkins story where he's sitting around playing in his studio or something, and somebody comes up and goes, "Man, that guitar sounds amazing." And he puts it down on the ground and goes, "Oh yeah, how's it sound now?"
I've heard that story with Danny Gatton.
Oh yeah.
And that makes more sense than Chet to me, but Chet just seems like so Christ-like to me. Like he's so nice and gracious. I mean, everything about his music is about being generous. I mean,
True.
I know if you had went over Chet Atkins for dinner, it would have been really, really nice.
Yeah, I get that. I get that feeling.
Want to get some pizza? Campilongo, he would have. It would have been nice, and I get a really good feeling about him. But anyway, maybe he did say it. He's. There's also that story. Somebody came up to him and said, "Wow, you're really good, but you're no Chet Atkins."
Tell me about the inspiration you draw from Chet. Like, I'd like to hear about some of the other people as well, but obviously, like, Chet was a finger picker and you're a flat picker, but you do a lot of hybrid stuff. Was he somebody that you learned a lot of things from, like in your early days? I don't know if you ever saw him or met him or anything, but was he a big inspiration for you musically?
Totally. I mean, I never met him. I wish I could have, though I probably wouldn't have been able to speak. I did see him once live, and it was great. And I still learn from Chet Atkins. I have probably over 100 Chet Atkins records. His craftsmanship is so developed.
Flawless.
It's flawless. Like, the ideas, the way he presents them, his endings are always like really charming and eventful. Like, they're just this tidy bow on a beautiful wrapped box. His licks are great, and they're kind of distilled. There's it's like da 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 da. Can't remember the name of that song. He does this like little out lick on it, and it's this like amazing, distilled out lick. It's not like if you were listening to Desperado by Pat Martino or something, which is a wealth of riches too, but there's just so much text there. It's like a 600-page book. So his licks are always really good and really distilled. The other thing I learned from him was, I wish I could put this better, but no song is beneath me.
Right.
When I didn't go to music college, but some of the guys, not my band now, but some of the guys I've met throughout the years will be like, hey, there's no way I'm playing Girl from Ipanema, or no Satin Doll or something, or All the Things You Are. They just say, I'm not playing that. I'm sick of that song. And I kind of get that, but, like Chet, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to make my point, but there's no song I won't say I won't play.
Right.
And in part due to Chet. I mean, you'll even look at his record sometimes, you're like, geez, he's doing Mrs. Robinson, huh?
And kicking its ass.
It's kicking its ass, and like bringing like little twists in the harmony and nailing the melody.
Super strong.
I wish I could think of some of the cornier ones, because sometimes it's pretty corny. I'll think, geez, you're doing that one. I mean, even like yakety sax. I mean, that's pretty corny, and yet, like, I love it. I love his version and the version he does with Mark Knopfler. Whatever he does, it sounds good.
Do you have a favorite era of his? Like, were the early, like the late 40s, early 50s, were those important for you when you were a kid growing up, or did you not really get into him until later?
No, I think I got into him when I was about 20 years old. And I got a cassette, and I can't remember how I got the cassette, darn it. And I had the feeling like I loved this, but I kind of shouldn't at the time. I mean, I was into the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Hendrix and Deep Purple, Django Reinhardt. It wasn't all, suburban rock. An Italian kid in South San Francisco, in middle-class suburbs. Chet wasn't the thing you heard through, car speakers. So I ended up just kind of falling in love with it. And I mean, I like almost everything he does. Some of the DX7 sounds.
It gets a little much, yeah.
A little much, I mean, I think there's some of that on that Mark Knopfler, Chet Atkins record, Neck and Neck, I think it's called.
Sure, it is, yeah.
And man, no problem. No problem. I will embrace that DX7 on that record. I think it's some of the, maybe a little later, I'm kind of like a little lukewarm about in the context of Chet, but he really kept growing. I mean, that's the amazing thing about him is he just got better. There's that record where he tunes his bass strings down. I think it's called Solo Flight.
Oh, I don't know that one.
It's really good. And, his collaborations were always good. But I always kind of preferred, I mean, even though the Lenny Breau record's great, the Jerry Reed, just 2 Jerry Reeds are good, I always kind of prefer just Chet doing his own thing. Chet at Home. There's another one, I really love it, and I can't think of the name. I mean, the one that really turned me around was a session with Chet Atkins, and I think he has Homer and Jethro in that group. That's a great record, too. And it's where, Chet's playing and every hair is really in place. And I kind of like 10 years later, it was a little less, his hair was a tiny bit messier. And yet well-crafted, can't eliminate one single note. I'm not a big fan of the Chester and Lester record.
Yeah, it gets a little over the top.
Yeah.
With the comedy and stuff.
Yeah, like it's kind of like the one he's known for and still sells. And
oh, really?
But I mean, that's just an aside. I mean, for what it's worth. And if it's turning somebody on to Chet and Les Paul, I'm all for it. But he was a big influence. I mean, and it's not like I outgrew it. I mean, I'll never be as great as Chet. It seems to be, I mean, a full-time thing. Like if I really wanted to be like, okay, Chet's going to be my thing, I think like a thumb pick might be in order.
You never went down that road where you got so into him that you played with a thumb pick?
I tried it for about a day. And, I use until like about 3 years ago, I used those tiny little Fender jazz picks.
Uh-huh.
They used to be white and made of a certain kind of celluloid, I guess it's called, plastic. And so I'm kind of used to having some of my flesh on my right hand be a part of my sound. And I don't mean like those, Buchanan false harmonics, or the ZZ Top thing. I mean, it's just kind of there. And I feel really an intimate relationship with my right hand and my strings. And that would be a big give up. I mean, I'm trying to think of like somebody like Lenny Breau, who in my mind was the greatest guitarist who's ever lived in some ways, as far as like technical ability and telling a story at the same time.
Yeah.
Didn't have any apparent problems, but that said, when I'm playing, I do kind of find that part of it what I feel a lot of gratification from. So it would have been hard for me to go to a thumb pick, but after one day of research,
you went deep in that day.
Yeah, that was a deep day.
Can we talk a little bit about your writing process? I find a lot of the songs or a lot of the pieces that you write are so guitaristic, obviously. Like there's a lot of like really idiosyncratic bends and things that stylistically are so Jim Campilongo-y. I don't know, like if you were a clarinet player, would you write music differently than you are now? Like how integral is actually the guitar performance part of what you're doing, part of your writing process?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, if I learned a clarinet tune, I would try to employ whatever the strengths of the guitar allowed. And if I learn a song, a jazz standard, I might be more attracted to playing a 2 or 3 note cluster chord than a Joe Pass chord grip.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I play, I try to exploit what the guitar will allow me to do, because meanwhile, as guitarists, I'm dealing with stretching my fourth finger up a major third to go down in pitch, and whatever things are difficult about the guitar that we really can't play a full 11th chord easily, or things like that. There's a lot of drawbacks. I mean, I don't think the guitar was invented to be this big chromatic instrument. It's really 3D chess, and it's part of what's beautiful, and it's part of why one day you could think, hey, I'm pretty good, I'm getting this thing, and the next day you could not thinking
Quit.
that. Yeah, or just feel mediocre. I never think like, oh, I suck. I mean, whatever, the voices in my head that are trying to undermine me might be more clever than that. I don't know. Or maybe it's accurate, assessment, but I might feel mediocre, or geez, I should remember this. So when I play anything on the guitar, I try and exploit those aspects of it that are pleasing. Harmonics, open strings, cluster chords, the tele sound, what position you're in, even though I love my Gibson 225 and the Duosonic, etc. So I think that they just come out that way, mostly. I think there's many songs I think I've written that could be played on sax and they'd still be a good song. But when exploiting the strengths of the guitar, I'm basically trying to keep it interesting. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, I do have one eye on the audience, and I also want to please myself. So if I can play a melody bending from behind the nut, unless it's too much of an effect that's inappropriate, that is more, and it's going to sound like "Look at Me," and undermine the song itself, I'll do that. And so, it's just, it keeps it interesting for me. It takes advantage of the strengths of the guitar. I was thinking about this the other day. I forget who I was listening to. Oh, it was, as usual, it was Ben Webster playing Nancy with the Laughing Face. And I was trying to copy his solo and the way he played the melody, which was really marvelous. But I thought, if I was really going to achieve what he's achieving, I would really need to plug in a distortion unit. Mm-hmm. Because the saxophone almost sounds like a distorted guitar.
Interesting.
And Ben could play, I mean, even though he was a genius, and he is someone I go to if I want to understand how one could maybe play a song, I'll listen to Ben Webster. It's ba da 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 da. And on guitar, it's good. But on saxophone, it sounds, it's almost like a Hendrix sound or something.
Yeah.
So, there's that aspect too, where though I just plug into the amp generally, sometimes I do miss whole notes and stuff like that.
What's your actual process like when you're writing some of these instrumental tunes? Do you come up with a progression first and put that onto your boomerang and just play around with it, or do you have a melody in mind and then develop the harmony underneath it with the chord structure, or how do you approach it?
Usually I think the chords some kind of chord thing would come first, and I sing a lot. I sing the melody that the chords might inspire. Okay. And I tape myself singing it, then I learn what I was singing. Okay. Because, I mean, it's almost certain that what I'm singing might not be a comfortable guitar move.
Right.
You know, like even when you're in A and you're playing some majory thing, playing the B, again, we're getting into this thing that I keep referring to. You know, do you reach back with your first finger and go out of fifth position into fourth position and play B with your first finger, or do you play B with your fourth finger on the 7th fret, fourth string? Now, certainly I play B, the note B, when I'm playing a major scale in A, or maybe do it in second position and you got no problem, but then you can't play C sharp on the 9th fret, first string, you know, not easily. So that's an example of like something that just rolls off the tongue if you're singing.
Right.
And I don't mean that B specifically, but it illustrates some of the things that are so easy to sing and yet a little bit out of possibly the guitar's comfort zone. So I take myself singing and I usually learn what that is. A real good case in point is a song called The Past is Looking Brighter and Brighter. It's off Dream Dictionary. And I usually try to write a song fairly quickly, you know, because if I work on it too much, either I kill it or it wasn't that happening to begin with, maybe. And I was working on that song and I was coming up with all these things and, you know, it just seemed like everything kind of sounded good. And that's when you know you're in trouble, you know. I mean, when everything sounds kind of good, you know. I'm better off when I think everything sounds bad, and it's obvious. Right. And I thought, you know, I'm just going to sing what I feel. And it's like nothing, you know. It was do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, you know, more or less. And I thought, I played it, I listened to it, and I thought, that's it. And it kind of sounded, and I'm really flattering myself here, and I shouldn't, but it sounded like a Maria Callas aria to me.
Wow.
Like that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And before that, I was, you know, thinking too much. And I just sang this. It's not even a nursery rhyme.
Yeah.
You know, it's so simple. It isn't even evolved enough. But it's the song and it's the truth. And I know that's a real intangible, and I don't want to get all arty-farty, but when I'm writing a song, I have like two extreme goals. One is this the truth? Is this the truth? I want to be able to say something else, but that's the best way I can put it. And
I get it.
The other goal I have is to finish it. A lot. I mean, this is a long story, and I said it at the Berkeley clinic. I don't want to have people hearing me say the same thing twice, but
that's all right.
Okay, I met this guy, a great songwriter in the 80s named Steve Yerke. And he was like a Bay Area legend. I think he's still writing, and if he is, my apologies for not being up on what he's doing. But man, that guy was a real songwriter and a lyricist. And I was lucky enough that he wanted me to play guitar with him. And he came over my house. He wanted me to like learn like his most recent 12 songs he had written that were all great. And I said, hey, Steve, you know, at the end of the rehearsal, I kind of waited. I said, hey, Steve, I got this half a song. Maybe you could help me finish it. And he looked at me and he said, everybody has a half a song. And I think that's what he said. That's how I remember it. He was super nice, and it really kind of pissed me off, you know? But I thought about it and I thought he's right. And so I can't remember what the song was, but I was kind of mad and I finished it. And I don't even remember what it was, but part of writing a song is finishing the song.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll even pretend that somebody's paying me like $200 to write a jingle. or something like whatever, $200, $2,000, whatever. And I'll finish it, and sure, did I go to the 6 minor chord, and that's typical, and then I did this, and that's like a cliche, maybe, but I finished it. And a lot of times that song, I'll bring it to the band, and like I said, they'll reinterpret the rhythm and the groove, and it becomes a really good song.
It takes on a life of its own.
It takes on a life of its own, and you finished it. So it was allowed that chance.
That's a really good piece of advice for people, I think, is that finishing thing is something that gets overlooked, I think, because, I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think that happens a lot.
It's a struggle in many, many ways. Like, you've got to face yourself. You've got to face that this is it. And I think like this whole, Bob Dylan was in the Chelsea Hotel for 6 days writing Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands for You. Like if I'm writing a song for 6 days, it isn't that good. I mean, not for a guy who listens to Chet Atkins.
Right.
Or, Howlin' Wolf.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to some highbrow stuff as well.
That's true, though. Like Wolf wasn't sitting there struggling over Smokestack Lightning for 9 months.
Terega might have, Soar might have, Mom Pow might have. But even if I'm trying to write like my version of a Fernando Soar piece, like again, there's the high aspiration of, is this the truth? Mm-hmm. And then the other aspiration is finish it.
Right.
So
I love what you said about singing the melodies, because that to me means a lot, that you are thinking about it as a vocalist in a way, and also that vocal phrasing and breathing comes into your writing process as a guitar player.
Well, totally. And a lot of times I write a song that I really like and I don't want to solo over it. I don't like soloing over it. It's not about soloing over it. And the guitar music I like generally has that. I mean, I don't really, I guess that's not true. I was going to say I don't really listen to guitar records, but I do tons. But Jeff Beck to me is a lyrical guitarist in the instrumental context.
Right.
But by the same token, I mean, not all his work, but I mentioned Alan Holdsworth. So is Alan Holdsworth. I like Bill Connors. I like Johnny Smith. I wouldn't say Wes Montgomery falls in that group. Wes Montgomery is like a true jazz genius, but he doesn't play lyrically like a vocalist. And the guitar records, I mean, at least I make, that's kind of the vibe.
Can you tell me a bit about who some of your favorite guitar players are? I know you've talked about Jimmy Rivers before and got a chance to meet and hang with him, right? Was that a cool experience?
Oh, it was life-changing.
Really?
It was in my late 20s and early 30s. I decided to get real serious, even though, Hendrix I think he died when he was 28. At the time I felt like everything was behind me. Like we said, when you're 20, you feel really old. But I decided to get really serious. And one of the things that I discovered was Jimmy Rivers. And I loved the way he played. I learned his solos, a lot of them note for note. And I felt that I got to know him. And I bet have you had that experience when you really study a guitarist who's just sounds on a record or sounds on your computer? You feel like you get to kind of know him. Like we were talking about Chet. I'm going to turn it around real quickly. Like, can you think of any guitarists that you felt that way with?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, somebody like Ry Cooder for me. Maybe even like Mississippi John Hurt was a big one for me, where I got like so inside, like I knew every song of his. He didn't have that huge of a recorded output. Yeah, things like that.
But excuse me for interrupting, but what kind of person do you think Ry Cooder is by learning? Like, that's kind of what I'm saying. I felt that after learning certain solos, like Jimmy Bryant, Jimmy Rivers off the top, Chet Atkins, I felt like I knew who they were personally. Did you feel that way about Ry Cooder?
I guess I did, although I didn't really think about it that way. And then I actually met him, and it wasn't at all like I had pictured it in my mind. And it was kind of disappointing.
I'm sorry. I mean, well, in my case, Jimmy was exactly the person who I thought he'd be.
Amazing.
And yeah, and he was, after this, I was just studying his stuff for a couple of years. Me and a buddy, John Dilks, drove up to Placerville, which was a couple hours away, and went to go see him play. And he was 70, I think, and he played just the same. And, he was like the guy I expected to meet. Like, he was really sweet, super talented, funny. He did a lot of things. I mean, I'm not saying I anticipated all this now. I'm just describing him. He converted Volkswagens into like motorcycles, like with 3 wheels. Mm-hmm. He did, like, he was a painter. He built his house.
Wow.
He went fishing. I felt like such a nerd compared to him.
Was he just sort of like a local small-time guitarist at this point in his career, or was he still like a recording artist?
No, he had a Sunday gig at a restaurant.
Wow.
And like, there were fanatics like myself all over the place, certainly in LA and Big Sandy and those guys. There was a lot of people that everyone I knew was really into Jimmy Rivers. I knew it was at a time where you generally hung around like-minded people.
Right.
That said, and he was a little bashful about the way he was perceived. I remember asking him, there's a tune on the Brisbane Bop record called Jimmy's Blues, and I had learned it note for note. And I said, hey, Jimmy, I got to ask you a question. And it was totally in earnest. I said, was that a worked out solo? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and he didn't know. I said, yeah, did you work it out before? And he goes, oh, no, we were all drunk. I learned a lot about jazz and swing from him at a time when I really could use it.
Did you actually take lessons from him or no?
Yeah, I took like 1 or 2 lessons. They weren't, it was like sitting in his living room, and they're on cassette somewhere, and I can't find them. I think they're at my mom's house. And if God is my witness, if I had them, they'd be on the internet like an hour after this interview. But I've looked everywhere here. I mean, I have stuff kind of spread out between coasts,
Right.
But yeah, I took a lesson with him, and for example, he looked at E minor 7 flat 5. He called it Little C7.
Wow. So he had sort of his own little vocabulary.
Yeah. He was not like Mr. Music Theory.
Right.
But the other thing that really helped me with him was, maybe like yourself and some of your listeners, like one of the first books I got was the Real Book. And, I'd be struggling with tritone substitutions, assuming this was like a concrete part of the tune, and some just stuff that didn't come naturally. And Jimmy was like, no, just play C to A7.
Oh, wow.
Instead like a bunch of passing chords and chromaticism. And boy, that really helped me. And it allowed me to do that. Like, because I had certain reverence basically out of humility and stupidity that, I thought, well, I have no right to reharmonize this song and throw out half the chords. But they were pop songs to him.
Right.
And, he
came from that era, right?
He came from that era. And he'd kind of give me a befuddled look now and then, going, oh, this is, how I play the tune. Even on I've Got Rhythm Changes, which he'd rip over.
I bet.
I go, what are you thinking? Because I'd be thinking, if we were in B flat, B flat 6, B diminished 7, C minor, C sharp minor, diminished, D minor, G7, D, and on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
And he looked at me, he goes, oh, I just think B flat F7.
He just boiled it down to a couple of chords.
Let's say it's B flat, B diminished 7. I can't say it, but like that quick.
Yeah.
He'd think 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5. I don't know if we're there yet. He might nail the 4 minor.
Wow.
And I mean, it's really doable. And instinctively, he'd play other chord tones, but it got me in the ballpark of not being frustrated by these million chord changes I was trying to nail.
Was he being, I don't know what the right word for is. Like, was he sort of like belittling his own knowledge, or did he really just not think of it in any other way other than just simplifying it like that?
That was his genius, was simplifying. Because in a lot of ways, that is genius. Like, yeah. Genius is getting something very complex and simplifying it to its most simple equation. And that's what he did. And he did it instinctively and intuitively. So it was not self-effacing. It was literally how he thought. And again, it really does work. And then, maybe you add a couple of chord tones here and there, but to get into the ballpark and get on the top 3 strings instead of starting scales on the lower strings, which was what I kind of was doing, and badly, it really freed me up to play music.
Interesting. Wow, that's so cool. And so you got to see him a bunch of times, or was that a short period of time where you saw him and took a couple lessons?
No, I mean, it was like a 2-year period where we'd go down and, drive down to Placerville, go see him play. And what was really wonderful was it ended up turning into a Jimmy Rivers tribute show at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
And it was packed. I don't know, it's 800 people capacity, but I don't know if there was all 800, but it was packed.
Yeah. And
everyone was there cheering Jimmy. I have a photo of me and him playing. I'm looking like really intensely at his neck. And he wanted me, I was really honored to play the heads.
Right. And
some of them were really hard. He does this one tune off Brisbane Bop's Slow Boat to China.
Uh-huh.
Man, check it out. It's really good. And he wanted me to play the heads because I think he was getting arthritis or something, and he was like a little self-conscious that he couldn't do it. And so I'd have to go, I woodshed it for 2 months, but it ended up, he played all the heads perfectly. They were just kind of in stereo, I might add that.
That's actually super cool, I bet.
Oh, it was so cool. Like, I was so lucky, and it grew from like being alone in my apartment, obsessing on some guy's lick, wondering how he played it, to like playing with him, and being an ally.
Did you have other guys at all like that in your life that were influential to you that you actually got to meet and hang with?
Not like that, I don't think. I mean, I certainly met influential people. I mean, that aren't household names.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you call Jimmy a household name. I mean, I've met some famous people. I'm trying to think. I mean, I met Roy Buchanan. I met Pete Townsend.
What was your meeting with Roy Buchanan?
Well, you know, it was pretty nondescript because it was the early 80s. He was playing in San Francisco. I went to go see him like 20, 30 times. I'd go see every show.
He played it in the Bay Area a lot?
Yeah, he played a lot. And if he played like in, you know, San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland, I'd go to all three.
Okay.
But anyway, I just posted it on my Patreon this morning. It's funny you asked, but I have a 62 Strat, and I brought it to the gig for him to sign.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, I waited around and, you know, waiting for some guy to let me in the dressing room. And the guy goes, okay, you can go in. And I went in and it just blew my mind that Roy Buchanan was there in 3D.
He was actually a real person.
Yeah. Like he could actually like turn his head and you'd see a different profile.
Right.
You know, it was just surreal. It was like Lincoln coming alive or something.
How big was he for you?
He was pretty big because, you know, I got the first record when I was about 12 years old, and I really liked it. I mean, I loved it, but I really liked this song called Pete's Blues, and in it he goes kind of Middle Eastern at the 5 or 6 minute mark. To this day, I just think that's sublime. And it really influenced me. Like some of the influences of Roy, like aren't necessarily like him playing Green Onions or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, if you've maybe seen that clip of him playing Misty from the PBS special, it's on YouTube. He did some things that were really groundbreaking, I think, to this day. I mean, so was his, you know, regular blues playing, of course, and his sound and his approach. So yeah, he was really big, you know, a big influence.
And stuff like manipulating the tone knob and stuff, was that derived from seeing somebody like that?
Yes, it was really, he made a huge impression, and why I'd go see him all the time is because it was before the internet. I mean, this is when you'd get like books like The Blues Playing of B.B. King, and it was absolute crap. You know, like I don't know, like a housewife in Utah wrote it or something, you know. I mean, not to be offensive, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how anybody, you know, for example, like I remember seeing him hybrid pick, and I just didn't know that was possible.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, you just didn't see it.
Right.
And so there was that, the tone knob thing for sure. I think I had discovered the volume knob thing on my own somehow, I knew what that was. But there was many things he did that I had to see from, you know, 10 feet away. And another one was he didn't really use a lot of vibrato sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like it was vibrato less. It was vibrato free. And it was a more direct message. I mean, this was the 80s, like early 80s, and everybody had like a Lab Series amp and, you know, a signal processor, you know. So it was so naked sounding to me.
Yeah.
And the fact that he played a Tele through whatever amp he had, you know, a lot of times it was a twin reverb. Man, it was loud.
I bet.
It's just way too loud. But that was unusual at the time, you know. So yeah, I learned a lot from seeing him play, and the behind the nut bend thing I saw him do, and it was a very simple one, but I really made an impression. This is before instructional videos and all that. I mean, to see somebody play the guitar, you had to be there.
So I don't want to take up all your time. We've talked for a long time already, but I do want to ask you in reference to some of your records. So you mentioned Dream Dictionary, which is one that I love, and another one that I love is Loose, and American Hips. So like those sort of late '90s, early 2000s, up until more recently. And there's a pretty wide range of sounds and approaches on those records. I just wondered if you could specifically talk for a few minutes about recording guitars and how you approach it. Like, I can't imagine that you're overly picky in a live situation. It's easy to find out your preferences with equipment and Princeton amps and all that kind of stuff on the internet. But as far as on record, to me, like, especially maybe American Hips, the guitar sound is so three-dimensional, and I don't know, if you listen to it with headphones, it's a mind-boggling guitar sound.
Really?
Is that just you playing and you stuck a mic in front of it, or did you like really work on that guitar sound? And can you elaborate on the recorded guitar tones of your records?
I a lot of times I don't pay enough attention, but one thing, that American Hips just had a good room. And American Hips is funny because, when I recorded that when I came to New York, and I had a small cushion when I got here of money. And I think it was $10,000 or so. And because I had been here for a few months, it got down to 8, and I had to record a record.
Right.
And unless I'm mistaken, I had overdubbed every record, like pretty much.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That, like other than Live at the Denord. And so I thought, okay, I only have the money to record a live record. I had the recording date set at Bedford Studios, which was a really nice room, and Darren Roven, a great engineer who I think recorded the records you liked, that you mentioned. He was the engineer, if not the producer, on a lot of those. So he was kind enough to come out here. And I'll give some tangible tips in a sec. But the first day of a 3-day recording, I got food poisoning.
Oh, shit.
And I went I had to go, and there are tracks that are on that record that were recorded the first day where I was like so sick.
Oh my God.
And I don't want to ruin it for you, but
this is American Hips you're talking about.
American Hips. About the third day, I started feeling human, and we got a couple more tracks. I know we did Ain't She Sweet on day 3 and a couple other ones. I think Like Hello was on day 3. But a lot of them, boy, I was like not feeling well. And but it was a really good room. And generally, not generally, I always do this. Now I don't want baffles. Like I don't want to use headphones. Like before I record, I say, look, I don't want to use headphones, and I want as little leakage as possible. Okay. Mm-hmm. But we'd mic the front of the amp, the back of the amp, and have room mics. And those were options. And if you're in a good room, it's a really good option. And then I reamp. And
okay.
Nobody ever asked me about this, and they just say, "Man, your Princeton sounds killer." And I kind of think, "Man, I guess it was a Princeton," like because we reamped. And it depends on what the amp. I won't do as another Princeton. I've never done that. Sometimes there might be like a killing amp in the studio, or I'll bring my deluxe.
So just to interject, so you will run a DI directly from your guitar into the recording thing, whatever it may be, a computer or a tape machine, and go through your amps at the same time, so that you can take that clean, unprocessed sound and send it through a different amp later. That's what you're talking about.
Exactly. Okay. Usually there's a DI from the amp, I think, is how it works it. I never do that part of it. Excuse my ignorance, but or maybe it is the way you describe it. If it is, I haven't noticed. So we get that signal, and then we create another track that's just that signal going through another amplifier, generally leaning towards room miking.
Okay. That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely the cherry on top. I can't say like what percentage is not original signal and what's reamping, but we blend them. And the other thing, I mean, even to this day, like, I mean, I love plate reverb, you know, like, and if it's available, usually there's like a polite argument about that I want too much, you know, like whatever everyone else likes for reverb, I always like more.
Double it.
But there's definitely plate reverb added after the fact. You could really hear it on Orange, which I think Orange might be one of my better guitar sounding records.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I do a tune on there called Blues for Roy, and I think, boy, that is one good guitar sound. And that was recorded live. Like, that's just, you know, we played and that was it. But it's a really nice sound, and I love the set. You hear the room, you know, without it being distracting. But that's generally how I'll record guitars. And
do you have amps that you like to reamp through that aren't Princeton's?
Oh yeah, I know. You know, I usually bring this one deluxe I like. I really like deluxes.
Sure.
And whenever I tour, if I have a backline option, I always ask for a deluxe. And I really like those deluxe reissues. They started coming out in the 90s. I mean, I'm not saying this is like go buy one for $10,000, but on 10, they sound great.
I know that you pin your amps, and I know that that takes the toll on tubes and the speakers and stuff like that. But what is it about say a Princeton or a Deluxe that sounds better on 10 than it does on say 4?
Well, Les Paul once said, if he sees a guitarist going to his amplifier, he knows he's in trouble. So, I mean, basically it's you know, just, I don't want, I want to be able to control my sound from my guitar. Okay, so that's, I mean, it's kind of a basic explanation. And I like that I could use the headroom. I like that if it's a room that, you know, just won't allow 10, or I'm mic'd, and that's even better. And it's a room that's big, but I'm mic'd and I hear it through the mains. We always say no monitors. Like that's our starting point. Because I think once you start using monitors, unless there's a vocal group or something, or an instrumental group, it makes playing music harder. But I could get more sounds like cranking the volume and turning down the tone. I could get an organ sound. If the amp's on 10, you know, if the amp's on 4, it's just going to sound like I took my treble off. But it's going to really woof. And it might not be super loud. It won't be like punish the audience. So I think I just like my options more when the amp's on 10. And I never think an amp on 10 is really all that loud.
Yeah, I mean, the difference in volume between an amp on 5 and an amp on 10 isn't actually that much. But so how often when you are pinned like that, say on a Deluxe, like it is pretty fucking loud, how often is your guitar pinned as well? Or are you mostly sitting down in the lower regions of the volume?
Well, it would depend. I mean, I would say, you know, 50% of the time or something, just reviewing the kind of material I've written.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it doesn't sound good, like dimed on the guitar, then I'll just keep it at 8. And these are things I do intuitively.
Yeah.
And it's going to change from room to room.
Of course, yeah.
You know, or like, whatever your flooring is certainly has a big part of it. You know, is it carpet? Is it wood, which is best? I keep my amp on the floor. I like that. And if it's concrete, you're doomed.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's probably 50% of the time, depending on the gig. I mean, if I just recorded a duet record with Luca Benedetti. It's all in the can. I just can't. I don't want to release it yet. But, even if there was no coronavirus, I was thinking November. But I think I put my Princeton on 4, for example, because I didn't want hiss.
Right.
Because we were recording, so it's not like no matter what. But if I'm playing a club, man, that amp's on 10. Okay,
cool. I dig it. And as far as your recordings go, the differences between, say a record like American Hips and then a more recent one like Dream Dictionary, has your approach changed much? Because your tone has, but is that just more in your fingers and the way that you're playing, or has the way that you recorded your guitar changed at all?
I mean, certainly things have changed and possibly evolved. I hope so. I mean, after Dream Dictionary, I think the Honeyfingers record came out.
Yep.
And after the Honeyfingers record came out, Live at Rockwood came out. Okay. So those are going to sound different no matter what. The Honeyfingers record was more of a crafted project, and overdubs were possible. And I planned on overdubbing every song with the damned perfect lead, that would, I'd be like, that was perfect. And it ended up, I didn't do that. And
but that was the intention.
It was my intention. But everything sounded pretty good live. It was really easy, that band, man. I mean, we had 3 days planned, and I think we finished the middle of the second day. But that said, there were some overdubs later, and other parts were added. It's at times it's a lush sounding record. I included Lola, My Baby's Coming Home on Best Of because I love that song so much. It sounds like a Burt Bacharach tune or something, guitar. So, I mean, that's going to sound much different than, and I know this is an obvious answer and you didn't ask such an obvious question, but then Live at Rockwood, where the sound guys at Rockwood recorded us, and at times, like, we didn't get enough cymbals, or, the room mic wasn't working. And, I don't believe there was a direct out. And I didn't want all that necessarily, but I knew that I was making a well-crafted record, and I knew the record I wanted to make after that was a, over-the-top live record. Because some of my favorite recordings are like the worst quality ever. I remember I saw Stanley Clarke in 1978, and he had Ray Gomez on guitar, and I taped it on this cassette recorder I brought into the gig. And man, I love
it.
I think it could be a record.
Yeah.
And there's guys going, yeah. I mean, even the Brisbane Bop record. Have you heard that, Steve?
I have, yeah. It's not the greatest sounding record of all time, that's for sure.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And you hear guys going like, hey, Lil, and stuff. But the music's really good. And sometimes that's just really the bottom line. And that's what I wanted Rockwood to be.
Was that all done in one night, or is that over a couple nights at the Rockwood?
Oh, it was over many, 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 many nights. They were every Monday. And, I couldn't really make the record I wanted to because I wanted In a Sentimental Mood on there and a song called Denise. But every time we played it well, mics went out.
Shit.
Yeah. The other side of the coin is literally that in this day and age, I have to really keep an eye on the budget.
Of course.
Unfortunately, I don't think I did that much on a loose, you know, a Table for One was like a fairly expensive record. Orange was kind of an expensive record. But since then, since Spotify and all that, I really got to prioritize, well, how can I make what I hope is a great record
as cheap as possible?
As cheap as possible.
Yep.
You know, there's so many. I wish I could make 3 records a year, really.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I'm sure you could.
I don't know. I mean, I definitely would do a solo record, and there's this Luca duet record. I would love to do a record with Steve Cardenas.
I love that Suppose song on Dream Dictionary. That's just solo acoustic guitar. That's super cool. You should do a record like that sometime.
Oh man, thanks a lot. Thank you. I forgot about that tune, and just played with Steve in January for the first time in like 3 years. And I found our old set list, because I keep them, and because sometimes I remember the song, but I don't remember that I know the song. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So the old set lists are really important. And I saw Suppose, and I actually had to relearn it from my own lesson by mail.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like I wanted it to be like classical gas, and I failed miserably, but it ended up being a pretty good acoustic, track.
Yeah, I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but let's call it there. I really have loved having you on here, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was so fun. It was so good, Steve. I really appreciate it. I just looked at the time, and we've been talking.
It's been a while.
Like almost 2 hours.
Okay, thanks so much, Jim.
Okay, have a good day.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye.
Stay safe. Bye. All right, music nerds, that was my conversation with Jim Campilongo. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week for another gripping episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. See you then. Thank you for listening, everybody. The Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast was recorded in Nashville, Tennessee at the Hen House Studio. You can visit us online at www.stevedawson.ca. As always, I would like to thank Jeremy Holmes in Vancouver, BC for his help with research, and we'll see you next month for another gripping episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers.